Let's begin. Shalom, I'm Jessi Sheslow, the Director of Community Relations at the Jewish Federation of Sarasota-Manatee. Thank you for joining this Heller CRC webinar, How to Respond to Anti-Semitism. I'm excited to have my colleague Eric Ross from the ADL's Florida region here with us today. The Jewish Federation of Sarasota-Manatee's mission is to strengthen Jewish life and identity in our community, provide for Jewish people in need, and promote support for Israel. Therefore, we are thrilled to provide our community with new and innovative programs virtually, especially in a time of such uncertainty. Please know that this webinar is being recorded. Let me introduce our guest today. Eric Ross has spent his entire career trying to make the world a better place by working within the organized Jewish community. After working for two small Jewish federations, American Jewish Committee, APAC, American Friends of Hebrew University, and Neve Michal Children's Village, Eric has spent the past 5 years working in the Anti-Defamation League's Florida region. As ADL's Senior Associate Regional Director, he runs their Glass Leadership Institute Leadership Training Program, coordinates the Florida Hate Crime Coalition, which the Heller CRC is a proud member of. He staffs the ADL Florida's Advocacy and Engagement Committee, and he also created a new and exciting volunteerism group called ADL Action. In his spare time, Eric is actively involved with several organizations and causes, and recently assumed the role of committee chair for the City of Coral Springs Multicultural Advisory Committee. After Eric presents, we'll go to questions. You may ask at any time during the presentation. Please use the chat box to do so. You're watching the Heller CRC's webinar, How to Respond to Anti-Semitism. Eric, screen's all yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the Jewish Federation of Sarasota-Manatee for inviting me to speak with you all today. I hope that you are all staying safe and holding up well during these trying times. Let me share my screen here. Bear with me a moment. We're all learning this new technology as we go. Oh, okay. Great. So when you heard the words Anti-Defamation League, I'd bet that almost every single one of you had the same immediate thought, anti-Semitism. And yes, anti-Semitism is still the bulk of our focus, but it's not the only thing that we're concerned with. For over 100 years, ADL's mission has been to stop the defamation of the Jewish people and to secure justice and fair treatment for all individuals alike. You see, the founders of ADL understood in 1913 what we still understand today, that one part of that mission statement cannot be accomplished without the other. Yes, ADL was founded to keep the Jewish community safe and secure, but the way we can do that most effectively is by ensuring that all minority communities, all at-risk communities, and all people of all religious faiths are also as safe and secure as possible too. So today, through our 25 regional offices, and one in Israel, ADL is the world's leading organization fighting anti-Semitism and other forms of hatred through programs and services that counteract prejudice and bigotry. And to me, that's one of the things that makes my organization so special. We have a narrowly focused mission, but we have a gigantic toolbox from which to address it. Very few people fully understand all the different ways that ADL works to create a world without hate. So I'm going to take a little time to explain ADL's work at the macro level before moving on to anti-Semitism today, and then finally what you can do to help counter the rising tide of anti-Semitism that we're currently experiencing. So how does ADL do what we do? We start with what we call the ADL Pie. And by that, I mean we protect, we investigate, and we educate. ADL works tirelessly to protect and safeguard civil rights in our country by advocating for church-state separation, fighting for social justice, protecting religious freedoms, and one of the activities we're most proud of, pioneering hate crime laws. It took ADL over 12 years of lobbying to finally bring about the 2009 Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Federal Hate Crime Protection Act, and we're still at it today. One of our newest initiatives is called 50 States Against Hate, and it seeks to strengthen hate crime laws around the country in the 45 states that have them, and to enact hate crime laws in the 5 states that don't. Those being Arkansas, Georgia, Indiana, South Carolina, and Wyoming. ADL also monitors, researches, and responds to individual reports of anti-Semitism and other forms of bigotry and discrimination. When someone is the victim of a bias-motivated assault or their home is vandalized, ADL is here to assist the victims in any way we can. We can be a liaison between the victims and the police or media if needed. We'll offer guidance on the most effective ways to respond. And in some cases, we'll even help to coordinate a reward for information that can help lead to an arrest. The next piece of the ADL pie is investigation. We investigate like no other group you've ever known. As a non-governmental organization, ADL is not bound by the same rules and regulations that law enforcement agencies are. Law enforcement, if they can't prove a crime has actually been committed, they can only keep the information they collect for about 6 to 12 months, depending on the agency. We can keep and collect the information that we gather indefinitely. We have an entire team of investigative researchers in our Center on Extremism who are responsible for collecting data on these people. They monitor the websites and chat rooms that they frequent, and whenever possible, they provide useful information and actionable intelligence to law enforcement. When an extremist commits a crime in America today, ADL is usually already aware of that person in some way, or at a bare minimum, we already have information on their particular brand of hate. For example, in 2008, when 2 white supremacists were arrested for plotting to stab 14 people, shoot 88, those are white supremacist code numbers that we'll cover in a little bit, and they were going to culminate their attack by trying to assassinate then presidential candidate Barack Obama. When law enforcement discovered this plot online, all they had was screen names and a chat room log. That's it. When they reached out to us, we had researchers that were already familiar with these 2 guys for months, had been collecting information on them. So when they reached out, we were able to immediately confirm their white supremacist ideologies and connect their online personas with their real-life personalities, which aided in the arrest and conviction of Paul Schlesselman and Daniel Cowart. The last piece of the ADL pie is education. We educate the Jewish community, we educate other minority communities, we educate law enforcement agencies, we educate teachers and students, and we educate anyone who can help us make a difference. Through ADL's A World of Difference Institute, which includes our No Place for Hate anti-bullying campaign, we've conducted anti-bias training for over 400,000 teachers and well over 1 million students, spanning 16 countries and over 350 colleges. Through our Holocaust programs, we are teaching educators, both Jewish and non-Jewish alike, how to better teach about the Holocaust. Through our Words to Action initiative, we're doing highly successful work with students on high school and college campuses, training them how to recognize anti-Semitism and how to determine the most effective response to what they've witnessed. And one of our really unique education programs is called Law Enforcement and Society. This is where we teach law enforcement professionals about the Holocaust. We've done over 100,000 to date. We teach them about how their profession was perverted by the Nazi regime and what they can do to ensure they don't abuse their authority in the future. You see, in 1920, officers in Germany and Poland, they were simply doing their normal police work, figuring out who broke into your home last night, who picked your pocket. But by 1940, they were standing shoulder to shoulder with SS, filling ditches with Jewish bodies. That transformation, that perversion of their profession, an oath they swore to protect the public, it didn't take 20 years to happen. It happened practically overnight. Our Law Enforcement and Society program started in 1998 in Washington, D.C. in conjunction with the U.S. Holocaust Museum. And it's become so popular that it is now mandatory as part of the training for all new FBI agents that go through Quantico. In fact, we've trained professionals from the Secret Service, Homeland Security, U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, U.S. Marshals, ICE, DEA, ATF, NCIS, and a host of other national agencies, as well as law enforcement representatives from over 85 foreign countries. Florida was even the first to open a satellite track in conjunction with the Florida Holocaust Museum in St. Pete. It took us about 1.5 years, going up every couple of months for 2 days here, a day there, but we educated the entire Tampa Police Department, all 1,000 officers, going squad by squad. Since then, we completed training the St. Pete Police Department, and now we're working with the Clearwater Police Department too. We're even working on adapting an online version so that officers won't have to travel to St. Petersburg to participate. Just one ADL facilitator would have to travel to them. I wanted to briefly tell you about another educational tool that ADL created to help law enforcement tackle anti-Semitism and bigotry, but it's also something that you, the public, can benefit from as well. It's called our Hate on Display database, and it can be found on our website. You can also find it by downloading the app or in pamphlet form. Without specialized training, we can't expect the average police officer to know what every single sticker on the back of a car means, or what someone's unusual tattoo might signify. But if an officer pulls somebody over and sees something that just doesn't quite sit right with them, they can quickly open the app while they're running the license plate and find out what the meaning behind things like this are. Now, in these photos, you see a lot of tattoos with the numbers 14 and 88. It doesn't represent the year 1488. You see, H is the 8th letter of the alphabet. So 88 would symbolize HH for Heil Hitler. The number 14 is a little more complicated. It represents the number of words in what is known as the white supremacist motto. We must secure the existence of our race and a future for white children. If you're like me, now that you've learned these things, you're gonna have a hard time not staring at people's tattoos as they walk by you in the store to see if you can recognize things like this. Long story short, each and every year, over 15,000 law enforcement members are trained in some capacity by ADL, which makes the Anti-Defamation League the single largest non-governmental trainer of law enforcement in the country. We train them on hate crimes and hate symbols. We train them on extremism from the far right to the far left, and from political extremism to religious extremism, sovereign citizens, you name it. And we train them absolutely free. They just have to ask. Moving on to anti-Semitism today, I should mention the work that we do to compile, vet, and quantify the number of anti-Semitic incidents occurring each year in America. Every year since 1979, ADL releases an annual audit of anti-Semitic incidents. We use it as a barometer to help us determine if things are moving in the right direction or the wrong direction, and to help us identify areas that we may need to shift our focus toward. I'll be the first to admit it is an imperfect science, because it relies on what people report directly to us, what law enforcement is willing to share with us, and what we can gather from the media and then vet. Like other self-reported issues, domestic violence, for example, no one really knows how many are taking place, but we know there are a lot more than what we know about. But we keep doing it year in and year out because it provides us with a good assessment of the trends taking place. So as you can see here in a snapshot from our 2017 figures, the total number of incidents reported to us in 2017 raised nearly 60% from 2016, from 1267 all the way up to 1986. In fact, 2017 was the second worst year on record as far as total number of incidents since ADL began tallying these numbers 40 years ago. Every part of the country was affected. For the first time in at least a decade, 2017 saw incidents reported to us from all 50 states. And unfortunately, things didn't get much better in 2018. There was a small dip, 5% in total number of incidents from 1986 down to 1879, but that was still the third highest number of incidents on record for a single year. I pulled some interesting tidbits for you here from the 2018 audit. I'll give you a moment to digest them while I take a sip of water. You're also welcome to snap a photo or a screen grab if you'd like. If you'd like to read the full report from 2018, you can find it on the website listed in the bottom right corner of your screen. And our audit for the 2019 calendar year is slated to be released a couple of weeks from now. It takes a while to get it out each year because it takes a long time to properly vet and confirm all of the reports that come in to us. It never fails. Every single year, we're going to get a couple of reports of somebody who's upset because they're getting their pedicure done, and the pedicurist leans over and a swastika on a chain pops out. And they think this must be a Nazi without ever stopping to ask them, is this a religious symbol? Are you perhaps Buddhist or Hindu? So it takes a while to confirm all of them. So at home here in Florida, I actually have a little good news to share. Not something I get to do very often working for the Anti-Defamation League. In 2018, there were 76 verified incidents of anti-Semitism in Florida, representing a 22% decrease from 2017 when there were 98. Even better still, the numbers for 2017 were already a 28% decrease in total incidents compared to 2016. Now, as appealing as it is to be optimistic about these numbers for Florida, I can assure you that trend did not hold true for the rest of the country. And to illustrate that, I'd like to break down and drill down into 2017 just a little further for you, because we noticed that there was a distinct difference between the number of incidents that took place before the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville in August of 2017 compared to afterwards. In just the last 4 months of the year, there was a 182% increase from the first 8 months of that year. And it's not just our findings that are showing increases like this. When the FBI released their annual hate crime statistics for 2018, they showed a national rise in hate crimes once again, just as they had in 2017, continuing the same trends as our audits. So why is anti-Semitism on the rise? Lots of people have lots of different theories, but I'm going to share my personal top 3 favorite reasons with you today. First, anti-Semitism has been normalized. When elected officials claim that Jews use money to control Congress, or blame the country's problems on globalists, or people publicly accuse Jews of invading their towns, or the New York Times can feel okay publishing a cartoon that's clearly peddling an anti-Semitic tropes, this is the normalization of anti-Semitism. We need a zero tolerance policy on intolerance. Second, it's social media. Just look at Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Snapchat, TikTok, any of these services. We all use them. But with a click or a swipe, you can find horrifying anti-Semitism that would make the Nazis proud. All because these companies' business models depend on your clicks and swipes. But it needs to end. Silicon Valley needs to step up and expel the anti-Semites, and we need to disrupt the current clicks for profits model, which is why we opened our new Center on Technology and Society right in Silicon Valley 2 years ago. The third reason, and this one's on all of us, it's a lack of honesty. Anti-Semitism comes from all sides, but for too long, people have been unwilling to admit it. We all must acknowledge anti-Semitism, even when it happens on our side, especially when it happens on our side. Yes, we have a problem with anti-Semitism from some elements on the left, and their casual demonization of the Jewish state clearly leads to the demonization of all Jewish people. And yes, we have a problem with anti-Semitism from some elements on the right. The wild conspiracy theories and the white supremacists who promote them are not a savory bunch. And yes, we have a problem with anti-Semitism coming from some minority communities. Now, we can't ignore the evil of systemic racism or the social and economic challenges facing communities of color today, but that's no excuse for the bigotry of low expectations. And there's no world in which it should be socially acceptable to attack people simply because of how they dress or where they pray. And so while there were only a small number of people from those communities committing those physical attacks that we all saw on television just a couple of months ago, we need a large number of people from those communities to stand up and say enough. And just to be clear, for those who are curious, yes, whether intentional or not, those who deny the reality that anti-Zionism is based and rooted in anti-Semitism are also contributing to the problem. Okay, let's move on to college campuses today, a concern that many of you have because many of you have grandchildren or children on campus, or perhaps they plan to go off to college in the fall. If you aren't already, you're probably starting to get nervous about the forms of hatred they may experience on campus. So let's take a look at some of the raw numbers for you involving schools and colleges. According to our audits in 2018, there were 344 anti-Semitic incidents reported in non-Jewish K-12 schools, a decrease of 25% from what you see here for 2017. Fortunately, it was still 46% higher than we had in 2016. Also in 2018, there were 201 reported anti-Semitic incidents on American universities or college campuses. A minor decrease of 1% from 2017 and a whopping 86% higher than there was in 2016. Now, for the purpose of this campus-centric conversation, I'm going to focus on right-wing extremism and left-wing extremism. Sorry, right-wing based anti-Semitism and left-wing based anti-Semitism. The latter of which, Zoom is still a little new for me too, I apologize. The latter of which, left-wing based anti-Semitism, will mainly come disguised as anti-Israel activism. Contrary to what you might think, it's actually a little easier to define what right-wing extremism on college campuses looks like, because their efforts focus mostly on recruitment and flyering. Midway through 2017, ADL released a report about an unprecedented uptick in white supremacist recruitment on college campuses. And it's only gotten worse since then. During the 2016-2017 school year, we found nearly 200 confirmed reports of flyers being distributed across roughly 100 college and university campuses. From 2017 to 2018, we saw a huge 182% increase in reported flyering incidents. And when you stretch it across 2 years, from 2017 to 2019, we saw white supremacist propaganda on campus increase more than 6 times. But sometimes our information surprises even the people who should be least surprised by it. When we published that report, we were quickly contacted by the Manatee Sheriff's Department because they had no record of a flyer being put up at the Bradenton campus of State College of Florida, one that we listed as happening in that report. And when the sheriff's office reached out to campus security officials, they had no knowledge of it either. So they reached out to inform us that they didn't believe there was an act that had happened, and they also thought that there was not an active chapter of the Atomwaffen division in Southwest Florida. So our entire report must be wrong. Well, we were able to confidently respond by sharing these images with them. The first came directly from the Twitter account of the Southwest Florida Atomwaffen Division chapter. So clearly there was an active group they were unaware of. But most interestingly, the photo shows that flyer that we reported on posted directly on top of the campus map of the university. Once again, clearly it happened, whether they were aware of it or not. Campus officials conceded that perhaps someone took it down and didn't report it, or perhaps the people who put it up did it for a stunt and took it down themselves. The second photo shows members of that same group who have since been connected to murders in California, Maryland, and Tampa. This really is happening right in our own backyards. Sometimes anti-Semitism from the right does extend past flyering. So I'd like to briefly talk about Richard Spencer and his speech at the University of Florida on October 19, 2017. Spencer is one of the leaders of the alt-right movement. In fact, he's the person who coined the term alt-right. One of the significant obstacles we're facing today is the awareness by those on both the extreme right and the extreme left that college campuses are fertile grounds for recruitment, and they offer an endless supply of press to cover what takes place. It's no mistake that Spencer keeps choosing to speak at colleges instead of public libraries or community centers. He is trying to get the most bang for his buck. But his recent visit to UF was also a great example of how ADL operates in situations like this. In advance of his speech, ADL worked with the university administration, campus Jewish groups and minority institutions, and the larger Jewish community, focusing on taking proactive security measures. Along with the ADL Center on Extremism, we shared timely information with law enforcement regarding Spencer and many of the white supremacists who were planning to attend. We even had a staff person on the ground to monitor the situation and to be a liaison to the community and the press. Now, unless you live in Gainesville, you probably believe that that day went off without a hitch. There was no violence of any kind. But if you live there, then you realize it didn't end that way. Following Spencer's speech, 3 individuals in a Jeep were driving around campus shouting at people who they believed had just come from counter-demonstrating. At one point, they pulled up to a bus stop and yelled out, "Heil Hitler," and the people sitting there, they didn't like it. One of them got up and picked up a rock and threw it at the Jeep. Well, the people in the Jeep didn't like that. One of them got out and started firing a gun back at the bus stop towards the people they had just verbally harassed. No one was hit by the bullets, thankfully, but when you fire a gun at a group of people, that is attempted murder. I can tell you that as soon as law enforcement detained the 3 suspects that evening, our Center on Extremism went into action. We pulled all of the information we had regarding those 3 individuals, all white supremacists from Texas. By 9 a.m. the next morning, we were able to supply that information with area law enforcement, Jewish community institutions, and academic authorities, including which hate groups each of them had been a part of and what white supremacist rallies they'd recently participated in. Now, the flip side of that coin is anti-Semitism from the left, which has nearly cornered the market on the mainstreaming of the anti-Israel movement in America today. That's right, we're talking about the BDS movement, the boycott, divest, and sanctions movement. In 2016, ADL began a joint project with the Root Institute, an Israeli think tank. The focus of the partnership is to create a comprehensive strategy for countering the BDS movement. The work is based on in-depth research and analysis of BDS efforts both in the US and globally, so that we can identify the many ways that their movement has been effective and to ultimately outline the most effective ways to combat those efforts. We hope that our findings will ultimately complement and reinforce the excellent initiatives that are already being undertaken by many other organizations. Now, who's doing this on campus? Well, for the most part, it's Students for Justice in Palestine, or SJP. SJP is the primary organizer of BDS and other anti-Israel events on college campuses today. About 6-7 years ago, you may have heard reports coming out of Florida Atlantic University, of the Students for Justice in Palestine chapter posting eviction notices on college dorm room doors. That tactic has since been duplicated on several other campuses since. SJP was first formed at UC Berkeley in 2001, and it has grown to over 200 chapters now in existence. Besides SJP, there's another group called Jewish Voice for Peace, which plays a large role in anti-Israel campus activity. It is considered the largest and most influential Jewish anti-Zionist group in the US. Now, despite the neutral sounding tone of their name, Jewish Voice for Peace actively works to steer public support away from Israel. They've assumed a very visible role in the BDS movement and have worked to support divestment resolutions on college campuses and in mainline churches all around the country, as well as academic institutions. JVP uses its Jewish identity to shield the anti-Israel movement with a veneer of legitimacy. This group has over 580,000 follows on Facebook and over 113 followers on Twitter. Numbers like that, that's not just a flash in the pan. Now, one of the latest trends that we're seeing come out of these efforts, especially on college campuses, is anti-Israel groups co-opting other social justice causes through emerging alliances with unlikely partners. Here you can see how anti-Israel groups have been making a concerted effort to couch their hostility towards Israel in social justice terms, like by linking the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to the events in Ferguson, or they do this in an attempt to appeal to a broader base of support. Here you see a Hispanic student group in San Diego that got together with the SJP chapter to co-sponsor a trip to the US-Mexico border, trying to link US immigration issues with Israel's security fence and her right to self-defense. As you can tell by the date, that took place before our own security fence debates began. So what does the ADL do to help with responses to situations like this? We train administrators, professors, and students about anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. We call for public condemnations of extreme activity. We advocate on the federal, state, and local levels. We share information with Jewish student groups and Hillels around the country. We arm students with research and talking points to assist them. And most importantly, through our Words to Action program, we encourage students to counter bad speech with good speech. There's two other very new forms of hatred that are going around right now that we're dealing with that I'd like to talk to you about. And both of them are derived from the onset of the coronavirus. First, as the coronavirus continues to spread, we have seen a sharp increase in activity by those looking for a scapegoat. There have been numerous cases of xenophobia and bigotry related to the virus, particularly against Asian and Asian American individuals and groups. Bullying, harassment, and slurs have become all too commonplace. Here in Florida, we haven't seen any actual hate crimes because free speech is not a hate crime, but things have already gotten bad. By March 13th, things had gotten so bad on the University of Florida campus that President Fuchs had to make this public statement denouncing racist and bigoted comments happening on campus. And on March 25th, the Palm Beach Post reported about this young woman being publicly harassed and verbally assaulted in Palm Beach Gardens simply because of her Asian heritage. Internationally, there have been many attempts to link COVID-19 to Israel, Zionists, and Jews, with some people baselessly claiming that the virus is part of a vast conspiracy of profit and gain by Israel and the global Jewish community. This charge actually seems like it's being led by Dr. David Duke. Yes, that Dr. David Duke, the neo-Nazi, the former KKK Grand Wizard, David Duke, a former Louisiana state representative, a former candidate for governor of Louisiana, and even a two-time former presidential candidate, once as a Republican and once as a Democrat. The number of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories that he has been trying to spin over the past month has been shocking. These are just some of the examples from his Twitter timeline from April 28th, two from March 12th, March 17th, March 19th, March 26th, and again just yesterday on April 2nd. We'll come back to that one from April 2nd in a few minutes. We've even seen credible reports of white supremacists planning to use the coronavirus as a bioweapon to infect Jewish and African American communities, urging their members, if they get sick, to go try and infiltrate and infect others. The second item related to the coronavirus is a brand new phenomenon known as Zoom bombing. In the age of social distancing, I'm sure that many of you have become familiar with this new video conferencing technology. We're using it right now. Zoom bombing is when somebody infiltrates a video conference and then disrupts it with hate speech, with threats, with graphic images of hatred or hate symbols, and sometimes even nudity or pornography. Each and every single day, we are seeing more and more of these types of cyber attacks take place. While some of these can be attributed to internet trolls without specific racist intentions, there has been a sizable increase in extremists specifically using it to target Jewish institutions and other public forums with their white supremacy hate. Across the country, we've seen online lessons disrupted from schools at every level. We've seen synagogue prayers defiled, and we've seen educational briefings like this one interrupted. In fact, just this week at the University of Florida, the Student Senate meeting was Zoom bombed with swastikas, genitalia, and sex acts. Also just this week, we saw a kindergarten exercise class from a Jewish school in South Florida disrupted by calls to gas the Jews. A kindergarten class. Now, for the question on all of your minds, what can you do to help push back against the rising tide of anti-Semitism today? Let's start with the easy lifts, or easier lifts. First, you can monitor activity in your community that affects the rights and treatment of all people. Remember, an attack on any religious minority is an attack on every religious minority. Second, don't engage in rumor mills. Be sure to confirm the information that you get before you pass it on as fact. When you get that email telling you to boycott a particular company because they're anti-Semitic or racist, don't just forward it on before you've actually confirmed anything. My two favorites are Snopes.com and TruthOrFiction.com. I use them often. Third, report any incidents to the Anti-Defamation League. If a hate crime has been committed, be sure to call law enforcement first, but then reach out to the Anti-Defamation League. We've got a very easy online report form. It only takes a couple of minutes to complete. You can find it at www.adl.org/report-incident. If you hear of a BDS event that's been scheduled near you, call our office to let us know or file that incident report so that we can properly monitor the situation and respond if necessary. If someone has been harassed or discriminated against, urge them to reach out to ADL. It only takes a few minutes, but it can make a big difference. And if we don't have accurate numbers, we can't accurately address the problem. Fourth, those hate incidents sometimes really just boil down to bullying. Sometimes they're religious harassment. But when they take place in schools, they take on special meaning. The lessons of our No Place for Hate programming are so valuable, we're willing to work with schools everywhere and anywhere to counter bullying and cyberbullying. We have a team of professionals ready to discreetly assist you when you find yourself in this situation. Fifth, you can visit adl.org to sign up for important news and action alerts so that you can stay up to date on these important issues. And sixth, you can get involved in our work and become a part of the solution in whatever way makes the most sense for you. But for those of you looking to do a little more heavy lifting, I've got a special lesson for you dealing with hate on the internet. The ADL has an extensive campaign to help clean up the internet, a task which is exactly as daunting as it sounds. I'm sure that many of you from time to time have come across hateful or even anti-Semitic content on Facebook, Twitter, other social media sites, and you don't know how to report it, or you try to report it, and there's 5 different ways, and you don't know which one's going to be taken the most seriously, or which one's going to be responded to quickly. we've done the homework for you. We created our Cyber Safety Action Guide, which is accessible on our website anytime. It instructs you on how to approach various companies in order to properly report the issues. So let me show you how the action guide works. Bear with me a moment here as I get out of PowerPoint. We're going to switch over here, and that Twitter post that I mentioned earlier for Dr. David Duke. You can see here, Dr. Duke, he's promoting his podcast on the latest World Health Organization video proving that stopping hand transmission of corona is vital, and Mark Dankoff on the Zionist role in corona. Well, clearly, he is blaming the entirety of the Jewish religion on the coronavirus, or for the coronavirus. So what you would do is
just pop in. We can't see that screen. We're still on the PowerPoint.
Okay, hang on one second. Let me figure out how to share that then. There. Okay.
I recommend ending your screen share and starting it over with the new screen.
Let me try that.
And for everybody else who is listening, remember, please ask your questions in the chat, and shortly we will get to them.
So when you see something like this, you'll come over to ADL Cyber Safety Action Guide. As you can see here, we have essentially every social media platform you can think of. In this case, it's on Twitter. You would open Twitter. And what we give you first is Twitter's own terms and policies on what they allow and do not allow, so that you can educate yourself and then frame your complaint by using their rules to aid you. Once you've read through that, you would come down to report abusive behavior. And in this case, it's going to take you to Twitter's own tutorial on how to report abusive behavior. For other platforms, we've had to write the tutorials for you. So you would click on that and we'll explain to you there's these 3 ways to report something, but we recommend this way is the most effective. So I've done this many times. So not sure how to get back out of this. Okay, so we won't actually report it. Let's get back to the PowerPoint. I'll report it later after the session is over, don't worry. Okay, now, many of you are looking for resources that you can use at home, at school, or even at work, and we have a wealth of items available to you. I mentioned earlier our words to action, but that requires an ADL facilitator to come to you. For those who that isn't an option, we have a resource called Think, Plan, Act, which is a ready-made booklet filled with activities, role-playing scenarios, and practical lessons on how to counter anti-Semitism on campus. Both high school and college it focuses on. If you'd really like to take a deep dive into the world of hatred, ADL's Heat Map is a first of its kind, interactive and customizable map just detailing extremist and anti-Semitic incidents all around the nation. And for those of you who are big data fans, we've backfilled it with data going back all the way to 2002. This can be filtered by type of incident, by type of ideology, and even by state or zip code. And if you'd like to focus exclusively on anti-Semitic incidents, we have a tracker for that one also. This one can be filtered down to the state level. And finally, you can continue your education beyond today's presentation by signing up to participate in ADL's new web series called Fighting Hate from Home. We began it 3 weeks ago, shortly after self-distancing started. Our first webinar highlighted the bigotry, xenophobia, and racism taking place all around the world due to the coronavirus. The second webinar featured Representatives Chu, Garcia, and Wasserman Schultz, who each described what their communities back home are going through, Asian, Hispanic, and Jewish, respectively. And yesterday focused on the hate and harassment found in the world of online gaming. With more kids at home playing video games today than ever before, we need the gaming industry to do a better job of ensuring the safety for our children. Thank you again, once again, for having me. I believe Jessi is going to open things up for Q&A now, and I will stop sharing my screen. Great.
Thank you, Eric. I know a lot of our community members are interested in learning how they individually can help to fight anti-Semitism as it comes up in their lives. So I'm going to go to the first question I have. You did comment on the coronavirus and the effect that it's having on anti-Semitism. So one question is, can you comment on the impact of anti-Semitic incidents based upon coronavirus, particularly in our high schools? For example, in Cleveland, I know there were multiple reports of baiting of Jewish students by calling COVID-19 the Jew virus. Is this similar, or are there similar or other types of problems that occurred on our college campuses?
Yes, these incidents are popping up. We are seeing a lot more of them online. It's a lot easier to be brave when you're a keyboard warrior than in person. When they do come up, we always recommend folks reach out to their local ADL office. Although we're all working from home right now, each office has a team of individuals ready to assist and respond. We can work with you to figure out the best response. In some cases, it may be us being the mouthpiece and standing up for you. In other cases, we'll give you the tools to best handle it. And in other cases, we can work with the school administrators to better the situation, to teach students to be upstanders instead of bystanders.
So I did receive a couple questions prior to the webinar, and this one is similar to the question we just asked. If my child experiences anti-Semitism at school but doesn't want to report it to the principal for fear of being singled out or for more anti-Semitism to follow, what do I do as a parent?
That's a tough situation, and I feel bad for anyone who's in that situation. I grew up in Orlando, and in most years it was myself or one other Jewish student in many of my classes. So if somebody was going to make a report about something, it was easy to tell who it was that was making the report. Now, our trained educational staff are very delicate. They have ways of handling situations, of reaching out to administrators to minimize the risk of that, but there is always going to be a small risk of that. It's tough to be brave. It's tough to stand up and do the right thing. When you don't want to make the report yourself, ADL is in a bad situation because we can't approach a principal and say, we got an anonymous report that this took place in this class. Number one, it's probably going to wind up with the same impact that you were hoping to avoid anyway. And number two, the principal has no reason whatsoever to take us seriously. But when we come forward and say, we've got a confidential situation we want to discuss with you, the parent and the student do not want this to be made public, but between you as professionals and us as professionals, Susie Q, this happened to her in her class and the teacher's response was inadequate. We'd love to offer you our resources. We can train your teachers, we can train your students, we can come in that capacity. It's tough. And every year we have situations like this where parents ultimately tell us they don't want us approaching the school. The one scenario where we can go forward without a parent's permission is when something has become public information. Somebody posts about it online or the news runs a story about it.
So essentially, what you're saying is it's twofold. One is try to be an upstander rather than a bystander personally, and two, to get the ADL involved to help provide support for the school to help make sure this doesn't happen again, correct?
Correct. Yes, we can train the school, but we can also provide support for the victim. We can provide them with talking points. We can provide them with case law about why something is illegal that it's taking place. We have experts on all of these subjects.
And for all of those listening, if you are in the Sarasota and Manatee area, you can come to me at the Jewish Federation, and I have the relationships at the ADL if you do not feel comfortable going to an organization you're not familiar with. Great, so let's move on. We recently had Deborah Lipstadt here to speak, and she talked about the 4 types of anti-Semites. One of them is the dinner party anti-Semite. If I'm at a friend's house for dinner and another guest who I'm not that close with makes a joke about Jews, how do I say something without losing my cool and without being seen as that person at the party?
It's a great question. And so this is essentially a very boiled down question. The answer is our entire Words to Action program, because it's not you hear A, you see B, you see X, you do Y. Every situation has a different context, and every situation has different ramifications and outcomes. So the Words to Action program is designed to teach high school and college students, but the lessons apply to parents as well. And oftentimes we'll run 2 tracks at the same time with parents in one room and the students in the other. And so it provides you with a tool belt of ways to respond, and it provides you with opportunities to practice. I know it sounds weird, and for a lot of us adults, we haven't done role playing since we were back in high school or college, but practice makes perfect, and practice enables you to do or say something without losing your cool. So when you hear that, and your initial reaction might be to fly off the handle and scream at somebody or to walk out in a huff, but you've sat down and you've practiced responses like, you say that, but does that really apply to all people in that ethnic group or just one person that you know? Or that's making it broad. You can make it on the individual. You can say, you know, I know lots of people from that, and I don't know anyone that like what you're describing. Or, ouch, that really hurts. I don't know if you realize how offensive that can be. Something as simple as that. You're not acute, you're not attacking them. You're sharing your feelings. You're saying, ouch, that hurt me. And now that person either has to disregard your feelings or account for what they just said and talk with you about it. So.
I know oftentimes a lot of people make jokes thinking that they're funny, and they don't understand or fully realize just how hurtful it can be. So once they're told, they feel terrible. And that's an opportunity, really. Yeah. These jokes can present an opportunity for learning for a lot of people. So, and I know that we in Sarasota have had the Words to Action program here, but I think when all of this mishigas is done with the coronavirus, we'll have another one. We'll probably call you to come on back.
Always happy to do
that. Okay, I have one last question that was given to me prior. Where's the line between handling anti-Semitism myself and getting law enforcement involved?
Okay, so any situation that has you feeling threatened, you should get law enforcement involved, even if only to just simply document what took place. Harassment, bigotry, discrimination that occurs as verbal, these things are not illegal. They don't rise to the level of a hate crime. For something to be a hate crime, it needs to be both a crime, an actual crime of vandalism, an assault, an arson, a breaking and entering. So you have a crime, and then it's paired with evidence of biased motivation. Somebody says why they hate you or why they're doing what they're doing. So any instance of a hate crime, you need to report it to your local authorities. Where it goes from there depends. Each law enforcement agency does it differently. Some are very good about reporting to federal authorities. Some are very good about reporting to state authorities. Some not so much. But when to call law enforcement? If a crime's been committed, definitely. And if you feel threatened in any way, our recommendation is to contact law enforcement.
And I'd like to add to that, if you see vandalism of anti-Semitism, document. Oftentimes we in the Jewish community feel as though we want to erase it, cover it up, make sure that nobody else sees it or feels uncomfortable. But going back to the ADL's reporting, if it's not reported, if it's not visible, then it doesn't exist to law enforcement. So make sure that it is documented, either by yourself or by law enforcement. We have had an incident here in Sarasota where law enforcement erased it before documenting. And so I cannot stress it enough to those who are watching. If you see it, document it. Well, that concludes our webinar. Eric, thank you so much for being here on our Heller CRC webinar. And I'm sure this will not be the last time we see you, either virtually or in person, God willing.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, everybody.